Hello there and welcome. In the previous episode we started working on our saving system and we covered the player prefs. We learned how to save simple data like our settings, and today we want to continue with actually saving our game. Not only the settings, not simple things like that, but our entire game's content. So I explained in the previous episode that we have two main ways to do it. We have an option to save our game into a binary file or into a JSON file. Now both of these have advantages and disadvantages, but I explained why I'm going to use JSON as the main way. We are also going to learn how to use the binary, but that's just so you have both options. In my opinion, the binary one is not recommended. So let's start with the binary. Let's create the methods for the binary, and then we can continue with all the rest. So in the previous episode, we dealt with the settings, and the settings are located inside our main menu scene, but the game itself is located in another scene. We had this main menu save manager. So in order to actually make things work better, we are not going to create some kind of in-game save manager. We're going to use the same save manager. We're going to use this one inside the other scene as well. So first of all, we're going to rename this to be save manager, and this will be the main save manager of our entire game. Now you know that when we start a new scene, the objects are not transferred, right? So in order to transfer this object into the other scene, we're simply going to specify it inside the script. And because it's a singleton, we can do it. With other things, we cannot just load them into the scene and expect everything to work. But because it's a singleton and there can be only one instance of this object inside our entire project, then we can actually move it between scenes. So to do the change, we simply open the script, and we also want to rename the class name. So save manager, save manager. We also need to change the actual file name, but we're going to do that afterwards. So in order to move this singleton to the in-game scene, we simply need to go into this awake inside this part and add over here don't destroy on load. And it tells us that we need to rename the file. So let's go to our scripts over here and rename this to save manager. And also inside the settings manager, things change. So we also need to take care of that. And over here. So as we can see, we have this save manager singleton inside the main menu scene. But if we go into our game scene, we don't have this save manager. And we're not going to create one here because we don't need to do this. We're going to have the one inside the main menu scene, and then when we move to this scene by clicking on the new game, it will simply not destroy it, and it will be over here as well, and you can see it in action. So if we start the main menu and we run the game, then it already tells us that this thing should not be destroyed. But then when we start a new game, then we have our regular scene, but we also have the save manager over here because it is not supposed to be destroyed. And then we can access it and use it. Inside this save manager, we're going to actually have a lot of code. And as I told you, saving is not hard logically, but it has a lot of things that we need to do because there is a lot of data that needs to be saved. So in order to not get lost in the future, we do want to organize this one script. Now, of course, we can also separate the script into a few various scripts, and each one will have a different responsibility. But for now, we're going to stay with this one script, and we're just going to be organized. So in order to create some kind of separation between the different methods, we can actually create something that is named a region. I think I still did not talk about regions in this series, So it's something useful that you should learn, and a lot of you probably already know about this. So for example, in this one script, we're going to have a lot of different methods. Now we don't want to start looking for a specific method and get lost, so we can just separate the different methods into sections. So for example, over here we have this part that just creates a singleton, but all of these methods are related to the settings. So we simply come over here and we do something like that. Region. And then we just type in some kind of comment, settings, section. And now when we want to close it, we go over here and we simply say and region. So now the good thing about this is that all of this became one region, and we can simply click on this and it will collapse it into its own region. So now when we have a lot of different sections, we can simply collapse them all and it will be easier for us to look for what we want. So all of the different methods will be separated into different sections, and this way this entire script is going to be very organized. Now we can even go further. We can open this settings section, and we know that we're going to have more settings in the future. So why not organize it a bit more? Let's take all of this and create another region, and we're going to say volume settings, and then we're going to close the region over here. And now we can collapse this. So now inside the settings section, we have a volume settings section. And we can open this, and then when we're going to have more settings, for example, graphic settings, we can separate them into different sections. And this way everything is very organized. And that's a very good habit to have in code development, keeping everything organized, because then it will help you prevent confusion and bugs and things like that. And of course, it also helps you work faster. So we're going to collapse this. And as I told you, we're going to first deal with the binary way. So we're going to create another section over here. Let's just copy this so it will be faster. And region. And we're going to name it to binary section. So over here, we're going to have some methods that are related to saving into a binary file. And the first one will be public void save game data to binary file. Now, a lot of you may not like this very long name, and you maybe are used to creating shorter names for methods, but I like to use longer ones because we can know what this method does exactly. So this way, I am actually describing what this method does, and I don't have to use extra comments, and the name says it all. So this is one method that we're going to have, and then we're going to have another one, and this one will be load game data from binary file. Now this one will have to return an object named all game data, and that's an object that we still did not create. And for now, let's just return null. And inside the save to binary file, we need to receive this object as a parameter. And you're going to understand what this object is. So over here, we have a method that will simply take the entire data that we want to save and process it and save it. Over here, we're going to load this data and return it. So then we can use this data inside our game and actually apply it to the game when we load the game. So let's see how we save into a binary file. Let me write everything and then I'm going to explain. Okay, so now we have all of these errors, and that's just because we need to import all of these objects. So we're going to just hover and then using serialization, and we also want to use this using system.io, and we still don't have this object, so it's still in error. Now let's understand what is going on over here. First of all, we create a binary formatter object, and this is the object that is going to take our data and convert it and serialize it into a file, into a binary file, okay? We talked about this in the previous episode. So this is the object that is going to do that. Now, when we have this formatter, we also want to have the path to the destination where we want to save the file. So we're going to use this application persistent data path, and this is just a location inside the game folder, and then we want to specify that this is the name of the file. So of course you can change the name of the file, and when we're going to add more files, right, sometimes we have more than just one save game file, then we can rename them to game 1, game 2, but for now we have this. Then when we specify the path, we're going to open a stream, and this is just something that will actually write this information from our game data into the file. So we open this file stream and we pass in the path because we want to say, okay, create a file in this location, and this is the file mode because that's exactly what we want to do. We want to create a file. And if we hover, we can see that it says path. Okay, so I also included this path over here. Now, after we started the stream, we're going to use this formatter that we created and serialize using the stream this game data. Okay, so this game data, for example, will be our player stats, and inside is going to have the health, the hydration, the calories. So it's going to be some kind of object, and it's going to take this object over here. It's going to have this stream with the path, and it's going to serialize this into a file. And then we need to close the stream because this way it's going to be finalized and there won't be any problem with the game not actually saving. And of course, we also want to print this. We want to print the path just so we know where we save this. We're also going to see the exact path. So for example, we want to save the game. We're simply calling this method, and we're going to pass in some kind of object that is going to contain all the data that we want to save. So then we receive this object and we place it over here and we serialize it into a file. So this game data is going to contain all the different classes that contain information about our game. One of these classes will be the player stats, another class is going to be the environment, another class is going to be maybe some kind of open world information that we need to save. So we need to divide it so everything will not be together, but eventually everything is going to be inside this one object. So this way we can save it and we don't need to save a lot of different classes and do this over and over. Now we want to load the game, right? We want to load this object because right now this object is saved into a bin file, into this file. So let's delete this and let's say so in this load method, we are simply specifying the same path, right? We have this path over here and over here because we want to be able to load from the same exact file. Now, later, we're not going to have both of them over here, but we're going to save them as some kind of global variable. But here we simply specify the path. Now we check if the file, this file exists, then we want to load it. Otherwise, we're going to return null because it means that this file doesn't exist. So if this file exists, we're going to create an instance of the formatter. We're going to create an instance of the stream. We're going to provide with this path, but this time we're not going to create, but we're going to open the file. So we're going to have this stream. And then we're going to use the formatter, but this time we're going to deserialize this stream. And we want to deserialize it as this all game data. So the all game data will have some kind of structure, and we are telling it, take the stream of the actual file, right? This file, and then deserialize it, basically take all the information inside and build this object. And then when we created this object, then we're going to close the stream and we're going to return the object that we loaded. So when we call this, we're going to get back all of the data, and then we can use this data to populate and to actually set all of these things so the game will be loaded with this new information, or actually this saved information. So in order to get rid of these annoying errors, we're going to finally create this object. So let's save all of this. Now we're going to go here and it's going to give us an error, but we're going to create a new script and we're going to name it all game data. And it's going to be actually very small. We are going to delete all of this, and we're not going to inherit from mono behavior because this will simply be a class that is going to contain other classes, and we don't need any methods that belong to mono behavior. So all we're going to have inside this all game data is a public player data, and maybe in the future we're going to have more things, for example, environment data, maybe construction data. So these will be classes the same way this is a class. They will contain the data that is related to them because we want to separate everything and we don't want to have all the data actually inside one class because that's not clean coding and it's not following the principle of separating the different responsibilities, right? We want to separate the code into smaller and smaller parts so everything is not stuck together. Now, of course, we're going to have to create all of these classes, but because we're not going to deal with the construction and the environment right now, we're just going to comment them out and we're going to create this one script. But before we do that, we need to specify that this entire all game data class should be serializable, right? Because over here, we're serializing it, basically taking the object and transforming it into a byte array. And I showed you in the previous episode how this byte array looked inside the player pref, inside the registry. So it's just a bunch of machine code of bytes that represents this object. But in order to make it serializable, we need to make this entire class into a serializable class. So we simply say system serializable. So next we're going to have another script for the player data. And we can see that this is not giving us an error, and we can also see that this is not giving us an error because we created these objects. So the player data is also not going to inherit from mono behavior. It should also be serializable. And all we're going to have inside are 3 different properties for now. So we're going to have a public float array of player stats, a public float array of player position and rotation, and a public string array of inventory content. Now we're not going to deal with this right now, so we're going to disable this. And inside we're going to store the player stats, so the health, the hydration, maybe if we have some XP but we don't have. Of course, you can separate all of this into other classes, give them different names. You also don't have to put all of the different stats inside a float array. You can actually create separate variables for every stat. But just to save some space, I do want to place them all together inside one float array. You can do something like public float player health, public float player hydration, right? You can have them separated, but I'm going to place them inside this thing. And we're going to have the same for the position and for the rotation, because the position has three different floats, right? The X, the Y, and the Z. And then the rotation has also three floats, the X, the Y, and the Z. So together, we're talking about 6 different floats. So I don't want to create 6 different variables over here because it's just going to be too much. So I'm going to place all of them inside this one float array, and I'm going to give each one a number. And you're going to see how we do it. Now we want to create the constructor for this class, because when we are going to save the data, we need to provide all of this data from our scene into this class. And then this class is going to be saved inside this class. And then this class, this entire object, is going to be passed over here, and it's going to be saved into the file. And then the same way, we get this entire all game data object when we load it, and we return it, and then we can use it. So let's go over here, and the constructor will be like that: public player data, so that's a very standard constructor. We're going to get this information externally, and then we're going to set these fields inside this object. So just so you understand how we're going to store the different information inside these arrays, basically the 0 index, let's just comment this, the 0 index will be the health, the first index, number 1, will be calories, and the second one will be hydration. So each time we are referring to these player stats, 0 will be health, 1 will be calories, and 2 will be hydration. Now inside we need to save 6 different variables. So this will be 1, actually this will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I hope you understand what we are doing here. So inside the player data, we're going to have all of this, and all of this will go and be stored inside this all game data, and the all game data will be saved into the file and loaded from the file. Now don't get confused. When we're talking about saving to binary, we only use both of these methods: save game data and load game data. The all game data class and the player data class is not exclusive to this binary saving. We're also going to use both of these classes for the JSON, okay? So for the binary, we only have both of these methods. That's it. So we can close this and we're done with the binary. All the rest, all the things that we're going to add right now are actually shared between the binary and between the JSON way. But now you may wonder, how will it know to load from the binary or to save to the binary, or will it use the JSON way, right? We want to have some kind of switch between both of them. So for this, we're going to create a boolean. Public bool is saving JSON. And with this, we can simply know if we actually save to JSON or we save to binary. And then we're going to have a method, public void save all game data. And inside, if is saving JSON, actually is saving to JSON, then do something else, we're going to use this binary way. And of course, we need to provide it with the game data. And in order to provide it with the game data, we also need to receive it inside this method. So we can copy this and place it over here. So each time we're going to get to this part that we want to save the game data, it's going to call this method, it's going to receive all of the game data, and then it's going to check if this boolean is triggered to save to JSON, and if it's not, if it's going to be false, then it's going to save to the binary. Over here, we're going to add the method save game data to JSON file. So we're going to have a method for the JSON, and we're going to have these methods for the binary. Of course, maybe this is not the best name, but we can change it later. And the way we're going to trigger this boolean is inside the inspector. So if we save this and we go over here and we click on the save manager, we can see this boolean over here. So if we click on this, it's going to save to JSON. And if we remove this, it's going to save to the binary file. Now, of course, it's not relevant. You don't need to add something like that inside the game because the player should not even know about this. You should decide before you release your game if you want to save to JSON or to a binary file. Of course, you can also use both, but that will be just pointless, right? And because we still don't have the JSON way, we're going to leave it unticked, and it's going to go over here and it's going to save to a binary file. Now we also want to place this inside a section. So we're going to have another region over here and region. And this one will be named general section. So over here, we're going to have methods that are not specifically meant for the binary way or for the JSON way. We can also close this. And now we're going to create another method, and a lot of them will be very similar, so you can give them a better name. So this one will be public void save game. And we're going to have this all game data object. And we're going to set the player data inside this all game data object. Get player data. And then we're going to call this save all game data. And we're going to pass this data object. Okay, so we simply create an object, an empty object, and then we want to populate the player data. Right? Because we still don't have anything else. We only have the player data, this thing. So we're going to populate it with the data we get from our scene, right? Because when we save the game, the scene is opened, the player is standing in some location, he has a certain amount of calories, a certain amount of health. So we want to get all of this data and save it inside this player data of the data object. And then we're going to pass this all game data object into this save all game data. So this one, it's going to go inside as a parameter. And of course, it's going to check if we're saving to JSON. Because we're not saving to JSON right now, it's going to run this method. It's going to pass the game data over here. And then it's going to take it and it's going to serialize it into a file. And when we want to load it, it's going to do this. So now to get the data from the scene, we are going to use this method. So we're going to create it, generate method. And this method is going to be a bit longer. So I'm going to write everything and I'm going to explain to you what is going on. So inside this method, all we want to do is return a player data object, because over here, we are looking for a player data object, right? We need to populate this empty one, so we're going to get a player data object. So this is what we are returning over here. And in order to return this player data object, we need to have the player stats and we need to have the player position and rotation. So that's what we're doing over here. We create a float array with 3 different elements, and we say that the one that is at index 0 is the player state instance current health. You remember the player state singleton? It's something we used before to create our status bars. So that's just a singleton that keeps track of the player stats. And this way we can actually access it and check what is the current health. And the same way we do for the calories and for the hydration. Then we have another array with 6 different elements. So we have 3 for the position and 3 for the rotation. And then when we have all of these set and we got them from the scene, right? All of this information is taken from our scene. And when we have all of this, we place it over here. We create this player data object and we return it. And then it's going to get returned over here. It's going to be set inside this player data of this all game data, and we're going to save it into a binary file or into a JSON file. It depends on this switch. Now we also want to check that it actually works, that we can save the game. So we are going to do it from the menu manager, because we're not going to create a save menu right now. We're going to do it in a few more episodes, but right now we just want to see that it works. So the way we're going to trigger it is by clicking. Let's go to the in-game scene. When we open our in-game menu and we click on this button, we want to save the game. Later, we're going to open another menu inside, right? This save game menu, and we're going to have slots for the different saves. But right now we just want to see that it works, so we're not even going to open this submenu, but when we click on this button, it's going to save the game. So we go into the menu manager, and inside we're going to have some kind of temporary saving method that is going to call the other saving method. So public void temp save game, and then we go to the save manager instance save game. So we basically call this method, and this will trigger this one. It will get the data, and then it's going to go over here, and then it's going to decide which kind of saving to do, and then it's going to select the binary option or the JSON option that we're going to have later. So we can go back to the scene. We will go to the in-game menu, and we have this button over here, this save game button. So when we click on this button, we want to add another method to be called, another action. So we use the menu manager and we want to access this temp save game method. So it's going to be called. We also don't want to change the menus. We don't want to open the save game menu. We don't want to close the menu, because right now we're just clicking on this and we don't want to see the actual save menu. So for now, we're going to disable this. So let's save this. And if we want to test it from this scene, it's not going to work because we don't have the save manager over here. Remember, we only created one instance inside the main menu scene, and then it's going to get passed over here when we load this scene. So it's not going to work. So we have to go back into the main menu scene and start a new game from there. Of course, we can also create a temporary instance and it will work, but I don't want to confuse you. So we're going to save this and go back to the main menu scene. And when we click on the Save Manager, we also want to keep this disabled because we want to save into the binary. And now everything should work. So let's run the game and we start a new game. And now we can see that we have this Save Manager and the in-game menu is visible. We did not disable it. So now we just walk around, right? We walk around and we want to save the game. So let's go somewhere different. Let's climb over here. Let's go up. We have this nice view of our valley. And we want to save the game right now. So remember, we're saving the position and the different stats of the player. So we can see that the hydration of the player is at 94. He lost some calories. He has a full health. And we can also see the position. This is the position. This is the rotation. So the position is 1097 on the X, 515 on the Y, and 413 on the Z. So try to remember this because we're going to save these values. And of course, we know that we stand on this cliff and not in the regular position when we start a new scene. So now we're going to open the in-game menu and we're going to click on this Save Game. And we can see at the bottom, we printed the location of the file. So you can see users, and this is the location of the file. So let's go to this location. So let's go to this directory. If I click on this and then I copy all of this and then I simply paste it over here, it's going to take me, well, it's going to open this file. So let's just remove the name of the file and go to this directory. And we can see that we have this file over here, save game bin. Now we also have this save game 0, but that's just something that I played around with, so we can delete this. This is our save game. Now, if we're going to open this with a regular notepad, we're just going to see some gibberish, and it's not even understandable. It's not even a byte array. It's just some gibberish. So if we want to see that the data is actually the data that we saved, we can use a website that will take this file and open it inside a HexDump display. And let me show you what do I mean. So we go to this website that I'm going to provide in the description. So I'm simply going to choose the file from before and I'm going to upload it. And then I'm going to click on dump. So now we get the actual byte array of this file. We have this and we saw this with the PlayerPref, but now it's longer because we have more information. And over here, we have the information in a more visible way, but it's still not the entire data. Because it's decrypted and it's not like a JSON. You cannot actually see the values and things like that. That's why the bin, this saving to a binary, is more secure because people cannot know the values inside the file and they cannot change it. Well, maybe if they really try and use special techniques, they can even do that. But when we open this with this HexDump, we see this information, but we don't see the different values. But we know that it's saved because over here we have all game data, player data, player data, player stats, player position, and rotation. So we know it saved something. We don't know if it's actually accurate and it actually saved our position, but this we can only know when we load the game and when we implement these methods. So in the next episode, we're going to deal with loading the game, and then we can see if this data is actually the data that we saved. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're still not subscribed. It will help me a lot. And leave a like. It will also help me a lot. And see you next time.